Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Download with Joe. I'm hoping you can see us both. There has, over the last few weeks, been some minor technical difficulties, so we will try and get those ironed out over the next week or so, as it seems being a few thousand miles away from each other is quite difficult while trying to produce a LinkedIn Live. So for context, Joe and I, we have each week been focusing on a key theme within our industry. So for those that have joined over the last few weeks, you'll have seen and heard us speaking about in the first week, M&A. Second week was all about funding and fundraising. Third week, partnerships. And now this week is all around product launches, which is quite nice to discuss because, and Joe can introduce himself shortly, but Joe's background is, and was, shall I say, focusing on product as well as also go-to-market, working for a large conglomerate, and now with his consulting firm, supporting some smaller startup-based businesses. So we'll discuss a couple of relatively new product launches and what we think about them in the current landscape of the market, as well as some of the bigger ones, which may be a few weeks old. My name's Lewis. I'm the founder of LMC, which is a climate technology business solving talent problems. Joe, quick introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Joe Amador. So I focus on fractional head of product services for vendors. They can be small vendors, they can be larger vendors. So I do work with larger publicly traded OEMs in some cases, but I'm usually fitting into the product organization and helping something like a competitive analysis, voice of customer, market sizing, things like that. I also do a fair bit of work on the investment side, commercial due diligence, typically for the investors themselves. And then I do some work with the owners and operators where they're trying to find a solution to fit a need that they have that they've identified. And the work I do typically fits in that intersection of decarbonization of real estate and digitization of real estate. So you could say, green buildings, smart buildings, energy efficient buildings. Those are all the types of projects or vendors that do that are the types of vendors I work with.
Nice. You mentioned something interesting before, which was that when you first started, or a couple of years ago in your newsletter, you didn't really see a lot of product launches, and we are doing now, and perhaps that's due to some more saturation in the market and just continuous need to bring out a new product and to be seen to be innovating, and also tying that into VC spend as well and having more capital to do so. With all that, and given your experience with the likes of JCI and what you're doing, I know this is a minor part, but what you're doing with organizations in your consulting firm right now, how do you define success when it comes to product launches? Is there key metrics, or is there key areas that you need to focus on to make sure that you get the most out of the product launch?
Yeah, there are definitely key metrics. I would say that some of the metrics relate to the top of the funnel. How much engagement have we received around this new product launch? How much inbound? How many demos have we done? Those are useful. Those are helpful. But I've definitely seen cases where the expected revenue, let's say, of a new product based on the number of first round demos you've done just doesn't follow whatever typical model you might expect. So there are reasons why some of the metrics look good until they don't, or they look good and the subsequent metrics don't look good. Another point that I think we started talking about was, there's the product itself and there's the product launch, and they're related. Obviously, making a good product is very complicated. Maybe at some point we'll dig into that a little bit more. There are metrics there. There's a lot of work to be done. The product launch is its own animal to some degree. You can have a great product. You've probably heard it too, Lewis, where folks say, well, if we have such a good product, it sells itself. We don't need, and that's more than just the launch, right? There's the launch, there's the ongoing engagement plan, sales plan. And if it sells itself, some might say, well, I don't need a plan to do that. But you probably do. You absolutely do, you could argue. But as it relates to the product launch, what I'm typically looking for, I think a key theme is, what metrics can you provide that are compelling more than just, we think this product will have this value, we believe it does this? And typically that relates to getting a couple of customers, current customers, to use the product, beta test it, trial it, in a nearly full, nearly ready to sell commercially version, and then start tracking, how much money did you save? How much time did you save? What was the time to implement? What was the ROI? A product launch that includes those details, I always find to be much more compelling, because while every building might look at that and say, oh, well, my building's a little bit different, it's at least some hard numbers around the fact that this is doing something. And I also like the fact, and this isn't always noted, but if it's an existing client using an existing product, adding a capability to the product, if you're isolating out what's the additive savings, that's also compelling, because a big challenge we have in our industry is if you're already using an energy dashboard, adding a more advanced solution, in a lot of cases that doesn't add that much more savings. So being able to say this individual product capability that we just launched had this kind of savings is really compelling. I also think, working with the marketing team, there's a lot you want to do to get the announcement out, tie it to an event, tie it to webinars, tie it to other industry activities, and really be multi-channel in how you do this, right? Emails, webinars, in person. But I think I'm more focused typically on what is the message we can tell, what is the story we can tell, what are the numbers we can share, and I actually think in a lot of the product launches we see that's a big part that's missing, right? It's much more of a focus of just this is what we think it'll do, but I want to know, what has it done already for a client?
Yeah, and I think that ties into something that we were talking about off air in terms of maybe having testimonials tied to, what would you call them, mini product launches, or just even the product launch itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's always a question of, is it a feature? Is it a product? Is it a company? And, you could say, like, you're not a company, you're a feature. And that's maybe the most, I don't see that so much in our industry. I think that typical product launches are typically you're going to map them to a use case, right? So like there's an individual role in my organization that is a common role. It's not just I have this role and no one else in the industry has this type of role. And there's something I'm doing maybe via paper, or I'm doing on a very delayed basis, or I'm doing it very infrequently. And with this software solution, I'm now able to do it much quicker. I'm able to do it with less cost. I'm able to do it every week, whereas before I did it every month. I mean, a really simple example, which ties into something that we're going to talk about. If you're tracking energy for carbon emissions reporting for energy management, historically, you would just get an energy bill, a utility bill every month. And you would look at it, you'd use it, over 3 or 4 years, you could plot that out and say, okay, I see a trend. But now with real-time data, you see that within 15 minutes. So there's a technology component there that is enabling people to get 15-minute interval data, not 1 month granular data. And obviously that's a 10-year-old story, but that's a good example where that has a lot of value. But you could say there are absolutely companies that focus on utility bill data management that now also do real-time data. So they added that as a product. In terms of how they quantify it, do you pay extra for it? Is it included? Is it, that's always, going to be made up by that company itself. But something like that is absolutely a product that should be launched. New category, new use case, kind of improving on something that's happening today.
Okay, great. And I think that's a great segue. So thanks for that. In terms of one of the case studies that we're going to discuss today, we haven't really touched on anything to do with the UK thus far. Again, to the best of my knowledge, but there's a new company which has just been launched called MeterZ. Company launch, naturally, product launch. MeterZ by name, MeterZ by nature. What have you seen or heard from that business, Joe?
Yeah, so it's interesting. They're solving a very real problem that a lot of vendors don't necessarily think is still a problem, and that's just accessing real-time meter data. Now, the problem typically, to kind of go under one level deeper, if you're a commercial real estate firm, you lease out your space. A typical problem in America, I imagine in a lot of other countries, is your tenant pays your bill. It's a triple net lease building. Tenant pays the bill, and they have the access to the data, and you as the owner of the building do not really have access to those data. You can get permission, But if you have a big building with 100 tenants, it's possible that some of those tenants, just because they're busy, because they have other things going on, they simply just won't give you the permission. It's not I don't want you to have my energy consumption data. It's just, I got a lot of things to do. This is a distraction. I didn't get around to it. Sorry. So if you're the big building, you're trying to figure out, well, what is we're the owner of the building. We're responsible for reporting every year. And right now, a lot of that is estimated, right? We know some spaces, we know what the energy consumption is, we know what the square footage is. Other spaces, we just apply the same average per square foot. So that's certainly something you can do. But having low cost, not really intrusive ways of getting meter data typically is an actual meter, a physical meter. And there's a lot of them that are, I don't know that I'd say commodities, but like getting close to being commodities. But then there's also the software layer of being able to say, well, do we have whole data from the building? Do we have some way of analyzing those data streams? And that's the problem I see meters solving. There's definitely other companies in America that are taking the same focus. What's interesting is you talk to some vendors and they say, oh, that problem has been solved. But you talk to some owners of real estate or just the heads of sustainability, and they say, I'm so annoyed. I'm totally paraphrasing, but I'm so annoyed. All these vendors say, since we solved your meter problem or we solved your energy data problem, you should use our AI solution. It's like, no, you haven't solved that problem. No one has solved that problem. And I think even like 1 or 2 or 3 years ago, I remember having a coffee, I think I was in New York with somebody I know who runs sustainability. And it was like very surprising. Like everyone thinks this problem is solved. This problem isn't solved. And again, that was a few years ago, but that's where meters is focused, where people have almost jumped ahead and said, oh, that problem's been solved. Let's go focus on something more interesting. There's kind of that missing piece where actually everyone else overlooked the fact that there's a way to do this better. So that's where things are there.
I love those type of business models, that just focus on one application as opposed to trying to solve the full suite.
Yeah.
You've got you've got companies that focus just on FDD, and obviously you've got meters now focusing on that. I hope they do well. I've had the chance to speak to Stefan a few times now, and he's obviously he comes from a very good background with the likes of WideScore, so wish him and his business partners a very successful first 12 months. So next one, and this ties back into something that we discussed last week, right, which was talking about partnerships. Carrier's partnership with 75F focused on light commercial controls, which are perfect or are really useful for smaller commercial buildings, let's say,
right,
below 10,000 square feet, maybe less, 1,000 square feet?
Yeah, I would, I mean, I've seen all different numbers on square footage. I would say even a 50, 100,000 square foot retail site could be useful. It's mostly based on what kind of HVAC system do you have. So if you just have rooftop units, a Walmart, a Home Depot, something very large, really typically just has rooftop units, maybe 10, maybe 12, and thermostats. You really just want smart thermostats with more than just a basic schedule. Then you get down to a bank branch, but you're typically dealing with not that many zones, not a lot of complexity on the HVAC side.
Got it. So correct me if I'm wrong here, Joe, but I think it was back end of 2022, Siemens made another savvy acquisition by acquiring French-based business Wattsense.
Right.
And they've just released a product now, which in essence is going to compete, or already does compete, with the likes of 75F's solution.
Yeah. So that's right. So all of the larger OEMs, Siemens, Schneider, Honeywell, JCI would be the big four. Carrier's certainly in there. Trane is certainly in there. They all have some of them have HVAC, but they all have a controls product, right? So that's the actual hardware, the physical devices around the building, the thermostats, the actuators, the valves, the network gear to connect everything together, routers, basically supervisory controllers. They all have that. A lot of their business has always been the big complex buildings. So think a hospital, where not only is it typically a very large building, but they have very, very detailed and very validated kind of specific guidance around temperature, humidity, so on. University campuses, large office buildings. So there's always been an interesting opportunity in these small commercial buildings. And I've seen all kinds of numbers. The vast majority of buildings are small. That is true. But if you actually dig in, at least in America, a lot of them just aren't really addressable as a singular business where, if we build this product, everyone will buy it. But there's a lot of small buildings. And the key categories you see are restaurant, retail, things like bank branches, any other, you could argue there are some small offices. And so Wattsense had an interesting solution really focused on the European market where they said, we want to attack that smaller building space. And I had seen them a little bit more focused on smaller offices, almost like you own an office. You're not going to go call your big contractor. You want something that's, self-service. You don't need to call somebody to unlock your control system, to program it, reprogram it. Siemens bought them. Siemens has a history, along with some of their peers, of buying up some of these businesses. They had previously bought Site Controls, which was similar, right? It was a control solution for smaller buildings. What they've been doing is just launching more products and digging deeper or going deeper into a full-blown controls offering for the small commercial buildings, which makes sense because Site Controls, I think, was acquired 10 to 15 years ago. A lot of these products do honestly have a little bit of a lifespan where at some point you just start with a new product. You don't just keep upgrading and updating and incrementally improving. Making acquisitions here also makes sense because, for a Siemens, they might say, well, we could build this ourselves, but this company already has a nice product. It already fits well with what we're doing. And we can actually turbocharge what they're doing. Get it, distribution is one piece of it, but also just product and innovation and technology. And they can invest on both sides. So the product launch itself is kind of a doubling down or an enhancement around the controls offering. I still see them mostly as a European player, but I don't actually think there's technical or other limitations of why they couldn't sell this elsewhere. Siemens does have, to some degree, a history of having different products in different zones of the world or different regions of the world. So in some cases, it's just we have certain regions, they sell certain products, everyone's comfortable doing that. These large organizations, keep in mind, when you have tens of thousands, or Siemens might be 100 plus thousand employees,
Yep.
Moving that ship just takes time. And that's not a criticism. That's just kind of the way it is. I worked at JCI and I saw this too. So they're definitely investing more in this to be their small commercial controls offering. I don't know that I took away from this press release of the product launch that this is their core product and it's worldwide. It's the thing they're going to be promoting everywhere. However, it's certainly one they're investing in.
Nice. Well, a nice acquisition, and it kind of reminds me of the J2 acquisition a little bit because again, you're talking about almost being siloed to different regions per acquisition, but J2's product Finn has done a pretty good job in terms of really integrating that product into Siemens' overall portfolio of products or suite of products, shall I say?
Yep, exactly. That's right.
So just quickly before we move on to the final three, let's touch on Albireo Energy, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, MSIs within the US. They've just released a new product.
Yeah.
You're going to correct me now, aren't you?
Good. No. I was just going to say they've actually started expanding into Europe. I think England, they made.
No, you're absolutely right. No, they made an acquisition. Yeah, they made an acquisition back in 2021 or early 2022. So you're absolutely right. What about this alarm management product then?
Yeah. So Albireo is interesting, high level. If you haven't heard of that business as an entity, they're private equity backed, and their business model is to buy individual branches and pull them together, and then you have a lot of efficiencies of scale. Now, that's what the business kind of approach is in terms of what they do. And there's a lot of the private equity backed roll-ups. That's maybe a topic we could discuss at some point because there's just a lot to unpack there. Anyway, when you look at the branches, what do I mean by that? Very quickly, the large OEMs that make the products, the controls products, the HVAC products, even lighting products, fire, life safety, security, they in some cases have their own branches and employees and people who are selling, but they also in almost every case have independent entities that also sell those products. So think about if you at your home need new HVAC, you might have a Carrier or Bryant, which is a Carrier brand HVAC system put in your building. You do not call Carrier directly, right? You're calling your local HVAC guy, HVAC person, HVAC company. It's typically a small business. That model is the exact same, but different entities at the commercial level. So the only difference is at the large commercial level, hospitals, universities, large office buildings, you could get service directly from the OEM. So in this case, Albireo is building a business where they provide those services more on the control side as an independent, but representing different brands that make the products. So it's kind of like a dealer. If you think of like when you go to a car dealer to buy a car,
Yep.
it's a dealer model. The MSI work, that's becoming more interesting. That's master systems integration. And that's really the model of taking different base building systems and integrating them together. And there's a lot of value there, right? So if you know the schedule for your building is the same, why would you have to set up a schedule in your lighting controls solution and your HVAC controls, your building automation system? Really, if you can integrate them all together, also from a daily operation, you've seen, I know James Dice, our friend James, has these pictures where it's like people sitting in a kind of a computer room, and there's 10 different computers, and each one is marked like a different system. And that's actually not that wrong, right? There's a lot of buildings where I go here to this terminal to use my access control system. I go here to use my lighting control system. I go to this other, and there's a chair that's on wheels, and you can, and I've even talked to folks who say, oh, my, think of any OEM, my Siemens OEM building automation system expert, he's sick today. So I hope nothing goes wrong because he's the one who knows everything best. So master systems integration, the idea is, can we integrate these together? It's more of a service than a product, so that you can operate things in a little more of a cohesive way. Now, what they launched, so Albireo itself is interesting. They do actual service, right? They'll come into your building. They'll actually physically connect things together. They'll also deploy and install actual equipment. You might need to upgrade your equipment to do some of this work. That's understandable. But they launched a BAS alarm management product. And BAS alarm management is very interesting. So you think of, what is a BAS alarm? So the building automation system will have alarms, but typically based on things like temperature, right? I have a building, I have a room in that building, that's a zone. I want it to be 72 degrees between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. because 72 is comfortable. If that room becomes 75, an alarm will go off. And that alarm doesn't always tell you a lot of information. It doesn't necessarily say, this is why it's 75. It doesn't necessarily say, this is when it was 75. It just says, it's 75, it's alarm. And you might, as the operator of the building, know, well, that's where the CEO works, so we should go address that quickly. Or it might be, well, that's a space that no one's leasing right now, so it doesn't matter. So there's some local knowledge you have. Fault detection seeks to solve, to some degree, the BAS alarm issue. And to our point earlier, there's been a lot of companies that have jumped ahead to fault detection. There's a lot of good solutions there, but there's something in the middle that I think is still kind of percolating within the market, and that's BAS alarm management. Specifically, if you're a building, and I've seen some academic papers here, you might have across a large campus, a university campus, tens of thousands of alarms going off on a monthly basis. I mean, we're talking numbers, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of individual alarms. Now, challenges there. If that room that was 72 is 75, you may have an individual alarm going off every 15 minutes. So if that was to happen, maybe you want the building to be, you'll let things drift to 75 overnight, but maybe there's a problem in a space and it becomes 78 degrees. If you leave at 6 p.m., you come in the next day at 6 a.m., that's 12 hours. You might have 48, let's say 50 alarms for an individual space, and you add that up because maybe that's multiple zones, multiple spaces in the building. It becomes unmanageable is the easiest way to say it, where I as an operator cannot look at my building automation system and figure out where do I focus my efforts, because I literally have hundreds of, they're not tasks, but just think of them as line items that I need to address. And so BAS alarm management seeks to just take that core data and provide some organization, some prioritization. I've seen a number of different companies doing this. I think there's definitely something there. I also think on the buyer side, buyers look at this and say, well, is that the problem I need to solve, or should I just jump ahead to fault detection? It's a little unclear. I think different companies, there's no consensus. Different organizations will make different decisions. But for a company like Albireo that does a lot of BAS implementations, does a lot of master systems integration, which the BAS may be kind of the core product where everything is integrated into, adding this capability makes perfect sense.
It does, but you wouldn't typically see that from what you would consider Albireo Energy being a services business, right?
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I thinking of that business more as a services company than a product company. Launching products is maybe a little less common, or there was a lower expectation that they would do something like that. However, I think, to be honest, I think companies like that typically have the expertise in terms of like building a software product. There is just some software discipline that you may not have, and I haven't seen this product, so I'm not saying they're lacking there. In terms of knowledge, being able to identify what are the common use cases, what are the common problems we're trying to solve. The other core point, there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to eliminate all your BAS alarms and just use fault detection. I've heard, different stories where some companies say, organizations using software say, hey, we actually just use the fault detection product. We don't even use our building automation system. But I've heard others who say, if it's really critical, we want it to be in our building automation system because that's what everyone uses. Everyone can get notified. And I think there you have kind of a conclusion of, well, I want the BAS to function a little bit better then. And that's where BAS alarm management fits in.
I like it. So
Yeah.
5 minutes to get the next three in. So let's focus on
Sure.
NZero, which is a really interesting business, I think, and you can discuss more. But they've gone down the VC route. They've just launched a product called Rapid Emissions. Let's dive into that for a couple of minutes. What is it?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. They kind of have something they call it Rapid Emissions Profile. So NZero high level, they do carbon management. They do some longer term decarbonization planning. I wrote an article in my newsletter from June, and then I posted it in the middle of June, so about a month ago, on what I was calling enterprise decarbonization analytics. So a lot of companies that say as a core goal or end state that they want to deliver is we will help you basically develop a capital plan with a net zero lens, right? A capital plan is, when do I replace that piece of HVAC equipment? When do I rebuild or replace my cooling tower? That is always a question that companies with a lot of real estate are making, right? We need to know when we need to spend the money over the next 5, 10, 15 years. Now, what some companies are saying is you also need to have the lens of this should also get you to net zero or get you close to net zero. So there's a lot of solutions. There's a lot of companies. That article, I won't go through it all here, but it's readily available. And I'm happy to talk to anyone if it kind of piques your interest. So net zero has shown, even before this announcement, to be a little bit in that bucket. There's a lot of companies who are putting one foot in saying, well, we do something that's like that, or we're starting to do that. Part of that is their customers, if they're providing just your annual energy reporting, carbon reporting, sustainability reporting, the next question most of your customers have is, okay, how can you help me reduce and get better in the future? The Rapid Emissions Profile product, for me, is just another one of these products that, without a lot of data, a lot of time, a lot of boots on the ground, if you will, a lot of physical labor, starting to figure out, like, where are my emissions hotspots? Where are my buildings that are a problem? Now, the difference between this building is a problem because its EUI, its energy use index, is really high, or this building is a problem because, oh, this chiller is using much more energy than it should be using. There's a lot of complexity between those levels of sophistication. And it's unclear to me which companies really do this well and which companies are starting to do it well. I've certainly, as you can imagine, through consulting work, through just my own interest in the market, have done some investigation. And so there's a lot there to unpack. I don't think we'll have time to unpack. But what NZero is doing is kind of going down this path of what I would call enterprise decarbonization analytics, or enterprise decarb analytics.
I like it a lot. The business, as well as also the product or the technology that they've released over the last 18 months. With the next one, then, there's clearly a huge emphasis right now on AI, and we could have probably discussed for an hour, 2 hours, all of the different AI solutions that either are on the market right now or soon to be on the market that companies are saying they're producing. One that we will discuss, though, very quickly: Cohesion, based in Chicago, just launched a AI tool or app, should I say, which is called Savvy.
Savvy, yeah.
What does it do?
Yeah, so Cohesion is interesting. I put them in the category of a smart building platform. There's an energy, environmental component. Where I've heard them most mentioned just in the market is access control, being able to use your phone to access the building. There's a tenant amenity approach there. It's a better experience for your tenant if your tenant just needs a phone, right? Because even little details, I forgot my key card, I have to go wait for 20 minutes to get my key card at the front desk. That's annoying. So when you had tenant amenity apps and you had kind of back of operational type apps, they try to stretch between both. I saw this announcement as adding some AI capabilities to what they're already doing, right? So can we more quickly identify a problem? Can we more quickly identify patterns in some of the data we're collecting? The announcement was a little lacking of a lot of details. They for example, didn't, as I recall, spend a lot of time like, this company used it, this was the value, this was the savings. And I've actually seen that with a lot of AI-based products, right? It's more about, look how great this product is, you should use it, and a little bit less about this is the actual value, and this is the problem you're probably having that we're going to solve, and here's how. And I think that shift from not just talking about how great it is to actually talking about why it really will help you and why it really will help you in your business process. But I expect a lot more AI enhanced products, if you will. And I think that, digging in on exactly what does it do, exactly what is the AI. I mean, I've not with Cohesion, I haven't dug in too much there, but definitely asked investors of companies that are an AI powered app. I've said, well, what is the actual AI component? These are people, investors I've worked with, I know well. A lot of times the answer I get is, oh, well, they're still figuring that out, or, oh, they're still kind of building out the specific capability, or that's still to come. And I think, okay, so that's fine, right? But it's not really yet an AI powered app then. It's just aspirationally an AI powered app. So I think that's for anyone listening here who's a buyer of a solution. I think the question you should always ask when you hear AI is, what specifically is the AI here, and what is happening in your product based on AI that couldn't happen without AI? So
Nice. And you mentioned James Dice earlier. This industry owes a lot to the work that he's done with Nexus over the last, 4 or 5
absolutely.
years. Quick question. Do you think one of the things that James has done so well is again, removing the fluff and kind of trying to cut through smoke and mirrors, which this industry has a frustrating trend of picking up. Are you concerned that with AI and everyone being keen to develop the next best tool or application for AI within their current technology suite, that we may start to see more of that? Or do you think that's just my skepticism?
I think I think when it comes to AI, I think it's something that we could unpack much more. But I would say you're right to be skeptical when AI is mentioned around commercial building technology. And I only say that because, there's something I think we talked about a couple of weeks back, and I definitely put it in my newsletter. I'll just go back to the Accenture, I think it was like Q1 report. They said, this is a year of experimentation and learning and data prep. They didn't say data prep, but it was something like that for our customers to deploy AI solutions. And that was just for Accenture working with technology solutions across largest 500,000 companies, not building specific. So I thought if Accenture is saying most of their AI work is getting people, their clients' data organized, experimenting, trying things, I would argue our industry is probably not ahead, it's probably behind. So I think we still have a little ways to go before even there's readiness to deploy AI. And this is a topic I hear when I go to events where people say, I'm not, we looked at an AI solution, but the time it would have taken to organize all our data to be ready, just like, we don't have that time. Now that will be solved. I don't think that that's a deal breaker or a blocker permanently, but I think that that's one of the things that also is worth talking about when you think about AI. Like based on this solution, it's great. What are the steps you need to take to actually have this deployed in your office or your buildings or your portfolio?
Okay, nice. Okay, cool. Well, there's a lot to digest there, and I think for the others, pardon me, that we would discuss, I'll put a comment in the follow up on this, just because again we're trying to keep this between 25-30 minutes.
Yep.
I really like this one. You can tell you obviously come from a product background, right? So,
yeah, thanks.
But before we wrap up, Joe, final question. What would you say the biggest mistake is that people tend to make when releasing a product?
Ooh, the biggest mistake. I think the biggest mistake is maybe not seeing it as a longer term effort and seeing it as kind of like a point in time. I would argue product launches really are not, we spend a week or two or a month and a half. It's really something you should be looking at a quarter, 2 quarters. You launch, obviously, but there's a lot of follow through that you should do. And there's an opportunity to look at, well, based on the webinars we're doing, based on the events, based on the marketing, how many demos are we doing? And what does that funnel look like? And you can start making some course corrections. Maybe the product is sound, but the demo you've been using just doesn't really fully explain what's going on. And so you can improve that, and then things will be more successful. But I oftentimes see product launches, and 2 months later, you just don't really hear much anymore. And you think, well, you're still kind of in the launch phase of this product.
So perhaps seeing it more like a, like a sales sequence as opposed to just this like one mass email that goes out, hypothetically speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And the other side is I would hope that if a company thinks every quarter we're launching a product, and I guess there's some examples where every quarter you can launch enhancements, but I would think of a product launch as being a little bit of a bigger effort. And then maybe there's, you could use subsequent launches as part of that product launch to kind of reintroduce or reiterate, we had this product, we launched it. And then into introducing some of the success you've had, right? If you do find that we've launched a product, that funnel looks really good, we've gotten a lot of new customers, can you get some quotes? Can you get some quotes on what value you're getting or why you selected the solution? And that's part of the next step of the product launch that includes, and we're adding new features as well. I think that I don't necessarily see as much of that consistency or follow through as maybe you could see.
Okay, some really good intel there. So
yeah,
let's leave it there. Again, Joe, really appreciate your time on this. To those listening, again, thanks for tuning in. Please let us know what you think. And again, there's only so much we can discuss over a 25, 30-minute period. So if we have missed any big product launches, please drop them into the chat. Leave a comment. That'd be great. Next week, same time, we will see you Tuesday at 9 a.m. Central, 3 p.m. British Standard Time, and we'll be focusing on another theme. So, Joe, once again, thanks for your time. See you next week.